Kofi Annan is back in Geneva since a conference on Syria last weekend. The UN's special envoy has been to Damascus, to Baghdad, and Tehran, reminding all parties that his was the only initiative on offer for now. They're working on a new one that's enhanced, but he's arguing that Tehran should be brought in any case to the fold, echoing a call out of Moscow. The opposition in exile, meanwhile, has been in the Russian capital, trying to convince their host to review that position, pointing to Iran's active support of the Assad regime. As for the West, it's firmly against bringing Tehran to the table on Syria. Syria, where, as the bloodshed continues to spike, with the Gulf states arming the opposition, the country looks more and more like neighboring Lebanon during its civil war, the place where regional powers come to settle their scores. Which brings us back to Kofi Annan's point. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the Iran factor. And with us to talk about it, Iranian dissident Ramin Parham, co-author in French of The Secret History of the Iranian Revolution. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for your invitation.
Haitham Mana of the Syrian Opposition's National Coordination Committee for Democratic Change is with us. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
From Tel Aviv, Israeli-Iranian academic Meir Javan Dafar joins us. Welcome, sir. And from,
thank you. Hello.
From Washington, Robert Zarate of the Conservative Foreign Policy Initiative think tank. Thank you for joining us. By the way, Iran's embassy in Paris did not respond to our invitation to join the discussion. The France 24 debate, where you can join the discussion on Facebook and also on Twitter. You can find us at François F24. So we put the question at the top: again Kofi Annan on his foreign tour, echoing the call from Moscow to bring Iran to the bargaining table on Syria. Here's what the former UN Secretary General had to say.
I must say that throughout my assumption of the function of Special Envoy, I have received encouragement and cooperation from the Minister and from the government, and I look forward to working together, continuing to work together to resolve this conflict.
I'll begin with you, Haitham Mana. Is Kofi Annan right? Should Iran be brought to the bargaining table?
Yes, I think so. I think that the great mistake of Geneva meeting was to take away three countries: Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Iran. These three countries had a very good role for a good solution because they are not in the same situation. Sometimes they are in the opposite position. And we need, for a good solution, to speak to everybody and to take on consideration the common interest of all countries. For that, I think that Kofi Annan did the necessary to keep Tehran inside a political solution and not outside it.
Now, should Iran be invited to the bargaining table is also the question we put on Facebook. Nada from Ancona in Italy said, yes, why not? But disagreeing with you, Haitham Mana, is the spokesperson for the Syrian National Council. She begs to differ.
Iran is unconditionally supporting the regime in every possible way. We cannot therefore say in the present conditions that Iran is an acceptable partner in finding a solution.
Basma Khadmati, who adds, the moment Tehran stops its support of the Assad regime, then yes, Iran would become again a legitimate and acceptable partner. Most Western powers don't seem to even want to go there. Let's show you the reaction from the French Foreign Ministry spokesperson. We believe this country does not have a place in the action group that brings together countries and players that are really involved in trying to find a political and peaceful solution in Syria. As for the White House spokesperson, Jay Carney, he says, I don't think anybody with a straight face could argue that Iran has had a positive impact on development in Syria. Ramin Parham, when you hear Haitham Manah's argument, what is it better to have Iran at the table?
Well, if you allow me, please let me just say that on a personal basis, and I'm just back from a two-day conference of the Iranian opposition in Brussels. We all feel extremely sorry for what's going on in Syria, and It is certainly not the will of the Iranian people, and we do not want Iranian money and weapons to be used against you and your people. But Iran is part of the problem, not the solution. As a matter of fact, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Syria to Gaza, everywhere in the region, Iran is part of the problem. Iran is the problem, not the solution. Iran could become a solution once the scores are settled between the Iranian people on one hand and the Shia regime in Tehran on the other hand. Then Iran could become a very constructive factor and actor in the region for the development and the prosperity of the region.
But Mahaitem Mana's point is that when you leave them outside the fold, then they definitely will become more and more a nuisance in trying to find a solution.
Yes, but we have Ms. Kadmani was just saying that they have been actively supporting the Syrian regime. They do not hide this. They're saying it. They have finances there, money, weapons. Officers of the revolutionary, they are using in Syria the techniques that they use, the repressive technique that they use, starting June 2009 and throughout the year, 3 years ago, to repress the people in Iran, in Tehran. They are using the same techniques in Syria, the exact same technique.
No, but my theory is that we need all people which are behind troubles and not behind peace. We need to put together all these elements, because if I don't speak to Saudi Arabia today, they will continue to send arms. And I can't have a ceasefire in the country. For that, I must take in consideration people which are not in my opinion. If not, I will be alone. Basma Qudmani will be with the foreign affairs, French foreign affairs. They are together, and that's all. Like the conference of Syria friends, what happened after? We don't have anything now. We need to have a good solution for a very bad situation.
Meyer Javandafar, your thoughts?
Francois, one of the biggest reasons why Iran is excluded from these recent talks and from the diplomatic track with regards to Syria is Turkey. According to the Al Safir newspaper in Lebanon, they were the biggest factor why Iran was not invited to the recent Geneva talks. And the Turks basically see Iran's position as being very inflexible and very much in tune with that of President Assad. And it seems to me that the Turks, who are in second place, were backed, of course, after them by the United States and then France and the UK, basically want Iran out for now for two reasons. Number one, they want to weaken Iran through the sanctions so that later on Iran doesn't have enough leverage to be able to defend Bashar al-Assad. And number two, I think Iran being left out is part of the bigger game of the nuclear negotiations. I think the West especially doesn't want Iran involved in the Syria talks because they are worried that Iran might use its leverage over Assad in order to extract concessions with regards to its nuclear program. So I think for now, Iran is a victim of its own isolation in the region, and of course with regards to the nuclear negotiations. I think Ayatollah Khamenei made a mistake in terms of not reaching some kind of an understanding with President Recep Erdogan in Turkey, because today, when it comes to Syria, he is one of the biggest advocates of keeping Iran out.
And how do you feel about it personally, though, Meyer? Do you think that Iran should be at the table?
To be honest with you, I think it's taking a leaf out of the recent nuclear negotiations, although I agree with Mr. Parham that, the Iranian regime is very much involved in the killings in Syria. And the reason why I think they're doing it, the biggest reason why they're involved in the killings is not to protect Assad. That's number two. The biggest reason why they're supporting the killings in Syria is to send a message to the people of Iran that if one day you decide to have an uprising, we will do what we're doing to the Syrians and 10 times worse. I think the regime is trying to create a deterrence against an uprising in Iran in the future. However, I think it's important to try to have them on board. We can see, the West can have a number of rounds of negotiations with them, just as we are with regards to the nuclear program. And if they're going nowhere, after we've tested the waters, then we can review it.
Robert Zarate, your thoughts?
you know, I think that inviting Iran to join this process in Syria is akin to inviting a fire department, an arsonist to join a fire department. I think it'll be counterproductive. As some of the other speakers have mentioned, Iran has a history since the uprisings began of supporting the Assad regime, not just logistically and economically, but also with arms. IRGC is apparently in the country. There are reports of snipers at times operating, certainly training, Iranian snipers certainly training Assad regime troops, if not also participating. And so, I worry, that Kofi Annan's proposal to do this is making this more about Kofi Annan and his plan as opposed to dealing with the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is that there are armed opposition groups. It's important to talk about it in the plural. There is not one unified opposition at this point, but there are opposition groups that are holding ground. They are defending their localities, and they are forces to be reckoned with. And at the end of the day, I think Iran is at this point just simply a spoiler in any positive process moving forward.
But you have to speak to all sides that are supplying weapons, was the point Haitham Mana made.
But the extent to which the Saudis or other sides have supplied arms, they're at much lower levels. The Iranians have, on a state-to-state level, been providing, as Mayor just mentioned, support with regards to suppressing internet and other types of communication. They have put IRGC troops in Syria. And so I think on a certain level, you can't even compare what Iran, the extent to which Iran is already deeply involved in what's going on in the Assad regime to what other groups on the outside, what other countries such as the Saudis and Turks are doing. Compared to what Iran's doing, they're still on the sidelines.
All right, and Mayer Javandafar making the point that this is, of course, not happening in a vacuum. Iran with internal considerations, also with an eye to the sanctions that are hitting it. There's also the other backer of Assad, Russia, which is pushing, again, as we said at the outset, for Iran to play a greater role. Moscow, interestingly enough, which in recent times has scaled back its military ties with Iran. There you see the chart from 2007 to 2010. It's increased its military ties with Syria and lowered its military ties with Iran. Mayer Javandafar, why is that?
Well, I think the Russians, especially since Mr. President Medvedev came to power, in 2009, the Russians basically backed a nuclear deal with Iran, which with the West. Basically, they told the United States that, you know, there's a deal here. The Iranians would transfer 75% of their low-enriched uranium abroad. We will back it with, you know, try it with the Iranians. President Obama tried. He wanted to reach a deal, and Iran refused. And basically, the Russians felt really burnt out by Iran's actions then. And since then, we see the Russians have started to become convinced that they are not sure that Iran is really interested in a negotiated settlement. But also, President Medvedev genuinely had a more pro-Western approach. He saw that he could use his influence over Iran to get points for Russia. For example, by selling Iran out, by isolating Iran, he got the United States to scrap the missile defense shield in the Czech Republic and Poland. And he also used Iran in order to get a better term for the START treaty with regards to the nuclear weapons that both the United States and Russia have. So basically, since then, the Russians have learned to use Iran as a commodity. And now that President Putin has come to power, initially we were expecting that he's going to get closer to Iran. But we see when it comes to Syria, he's actually, despite the fact that he's calling for Iran to be included, he's not really insisting, because Iran's isolation in the region, especially and in the international community, seems to be disadvantage of Russia. And I think there's just one more point also, Francois, and that is Iran, when they built that secret site in Fordo, and they did not tell the international community, when the IAEA, Mr. El Baradei, the former head, said Iran was operating on the wrong side of the law, I think the Russians really became disappointed with Iran, and since then we see that Russia is moving away.
Haitham Mana, before we went on air, you were telling us that back in December, your group was invited to Tehran. What did you learn from that experience about Iran's view on what's going on in Syria?
It was the first open and well-known delegation from the opposition. And we discussed for more than, on total, 16 hours. It was very hard.
With the foreign ministry?
Yes, and many responsible in the foreign ministry. Not only 3 persons, but more than 6 persons. It was very constructive because we knew whom we are discussing. And we knew how to take a position in all what concern the relationship between Iran and the Syrian regime. I think that there is unconditional pro-regime in the apparatus in Iran, in the state apparatus. But I think it is not a final or a static position. It may be changed if the balance in the country change.
Ramin Param, for people who don't know how Iran works, Haitham Mana alluding to the fact that in Iran, there's several decision-making centers, and there isn't just one centralized line of policy-making.
Yes, it is very difficult to say how chaos works, you know, but remember...
who has the power right now when it comes to Syria?
Yeah, I would say those who did the repression starting in June 2009, those who repressed in blood the so-called Green Revolution in Iran, that is the hard line, the hardcore of the Revolutionary Guards, who have major stakes in the economy. They also have major stakes in the Syrian economy. They own high stakes in the Syrian automobile assembly lines. They have their villas in Aleppo. I mean, you know better than I do, you know. But they are the ones who control the money, who control the economy, and who control the security apparatus.
And they have the ear of the supreme leader?
Probably yes. Probably yes. And they are the ones who surround the supreme leader. Remember, just in 2010, the elections in Iraq. The nationalists led by Ayadi won the election in an undisputable manner. But who came to power as a prime minister? The Shia Nouri al-Maliki. Why? Because Qasem Soleimani sent a message to the Americans that if it is not a Shia, if it is Alawi, we will transform Iraq into a torch.
All right, we'll talk about Iraq in part 2. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.